Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush Show here on New Revolutionary Radio. From the Leonard School in Malden, Massachusetts, Gregg and company are here to bring a sense of ethics to your news. Whether it's politics, activism, or current events, we always seek to inform and never to deceive. Let's start the show.
All right, welcome to episode 60 of the GreggHoush Show. Sitting here with me tonight is Mac.
How's it going?
And we are going to talk about all sorts of fun stuff from the G7, which Trump thinks should be the G8. And I'm just glad he counted up there when he wanted to add,
Yes.
Then we're going to talk about 51% attacks. We'll explain those to people. And we're going to talk about some new charges and voter suppression, all the fun stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. The usual, what we get every week at this point.
So we can start off with good old Manafort. There were new charges filed against Paul Manafort and his wonderful longtime associate, Konstantin Kilimnik. And he was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to obstruct justice by using intimidation or force against a witness and also with tampering with a witness, victim, or informant. Basically, what he did was he went and talked to other witnesses who were already talking to the prosecutors and tried to convince them to back up his lies.
We don't really know if they had been talking to the prosecutors up till that point, but they were people that reasonably could be expected to be brought in to have those conversations.
And so he reached out to them, and then they both reached out to the prosecutors like, hey, he just told us to lie to you.
Yeah. Also, of course, it gets even better because he tried to be sneaky about it and use WhatsApp and Telegram. But being an idiot, he had both of those being backed up to his iCloud, which of course doesn't encrypt them. So when law enforcement had their standing warrants to be able to get into his iCloud because he'd already been charged and they was already under investigation, they just went into his iCloud and were like, look at that. Here's all the messages.
Including all the emails from 2011 to 2013 proving that all the things he was telling them to lie about were indeed true and not lies.
Yeah, specifically he was trying to get them to claim that, the group that he had funded to lobby on behalf of the Ukrainian government had only been active in Europe and totally had not been violating the law by, lobbying in the US. While being unregistered foreign agents. And so, he contacted the people and was like, hey, I just, remember to tell them that we were only active in Europe because that's totally what was the case, right? And then they were like, no, that is not at all the case.
They went straight to the prosecutors and told the prosecutors, hey, he just told us to perjure ourselves. We were active in the U.S.
They literally, one of the two people contacted the investigators to say that he, quote, understood Manafort's outreach to be an effort to suborn perjury because, end quote, because he and Manafort both knew that it wasn't true. So, yeah,
this group,
he
the
actually
Habsburgs
used
group.
the term himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And then, Kilimnik, who has long been thought to be just straight up a Russian agent, let alone possibly just an asset. But either way, very close ties to the Russian government. And while a lot of that has been hearsay and, little circumstantial evidence here and there, it's continued to pile up to the point where if you don't really believe it, you're probably not paying attention.
I mean, not all the circumstantial evidence is all that, little either. Kilimnik went to a language school that was actually run by the Russian intelligence. And that basically everyone goes, yeah, if you go there, you're becoming a spy, pro.
Yeah.
Then there's the part where back in 2005, he had been working for the International Republican Institute. That's one of the nonprofits that the political parties in the U.S. run to export what they pretend is their idea of democracy overseas. Well, he had been working there. And then in 2005, he was fired, asked to resign, whatever you want to call it. Nominally.
Given a chance to leave.
Nominally, the official reason was actually because he had been working for Paul Manafort on the side, and Paul Manafort worked for a whole bunch of people that weren't really all that pro-democracy, even by the IRI standard.
Yeah.
Like the government in Ukraine. What a coincidence, right?
Crazy.
But actually, it turns out that only
The former government of the Ukraine.
Well, at the time, the government of
the government of the Ukraine that used to be there that a bunch of protesters ripped
to
out.
deal with. But yeah, so about a month after he was fired, the head of the FSB gave a speech to the Russian Duma where he specifically denounced the IRI and cited information from a meeting that had happened in Bratislava about a month before, a meeting that Kalimnik was attending and was one of only 2 non-Americans to attend. And so former officials now from IRI are like, unofficially, that is why he was removed, because we were pretty sure he was at fault.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't to say it was certain, but it's certainly like, again, circumstantial evidence, and it was compelling enough that the people in charge were like, we think that guy is responsible.
Beyond, of course, circumstantial evidence, we have people who knew him well, such as Rick Gates, just outright saying to multiple sources that he was former GRU.
Yes.
So it's all over the place there. But now they are both indicted with more charges, and that's fun to watch.
I mean, Kalimnik hadn't been indicted previously, so this is a new one. Manafort's just getting more piled on him.
Yeah, well, he might have done all of them.
Well, I mean,
and more.
It might have been really dumb of him to, like, while he was, being charged and under investigation and all of that, actively try to tamper with witnesses, which he seems to have pretty blatantly done.
Just think he keeps underestimating the special counsel, like nonstop. Whether you agree with our government, our FBI, anyone else, I certainly don't on 99% of everything they do.
No, of course.
But you don't underestimate this man. Mueller is good at what he does.
Forget Mueller for a second, because frankly, like, this level of
the Keystone Cops would have caught him.
Exactly. Like, sure, their own incompetence would have made it not very easy, but like, once you have the warrant and can just get into the iCloud and be like, oh, and all these people are going to call you because, hey, this guy just asked me to perjure myself in his defense.
So we get to watch more charges against all of Trump's cronies there. Now, Trump himself heads up to go to the G7.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun one.
Of course, formerly the G8, but Russia was removed after they annexed the Crimea.
Yes.
And might have also done a lot of little small skirmishes actually on Ukrainian soil, even though they say that wasn't us and it was locals and they were rebelling.
And they were just happened to be using official Russian military equipment that, according to the paperwork, came from the Russians.
Yeah, only that. I mean, sure. So he goes over to the G7, and before he gets there, he talks a lot of smack about why isn't Russia here? Why aren't we doing this with Russia? Why isn't Russia at the table? Russia should be negotiating. And, the exact quote, I think, where is it here? I think it would be an asset to have Russia back in. I think it would be good for the world. I think it would be good for Russia. I think it would be good for the people of the United States. I mean, he just keeps going on.
Actually,
and on.
That's actually the second quote. That's from the one at G7 before he left for G7.
Yeah.
He told a bunch of reporters, I think it was on the White House lawn, actually, quote, Russia should be in this meeting. Why are we having a meeting without Russia being in the meeting? Whether you like it or not, and it may not be politically correct, but we have a world to run. And in the G7, which used to be the G8, they threw Russia out. They should let Russia come back in because we should have Russia at the negotiating table.
I don't think he understands that, what the G8 and at this point the G7 really are. This group is a group based on basically the size of your economy. This is the largest economies.
It's not even just the size of your economy, because it's about being a industrialized, developed nation with, Western ideas of democracy, because China isn't in G7. Brazil isn't in G7. Yeah. India isn't in G7. Like, all these countries that have bigger economies
that would
as
be the G20.
As big or bigger than Russia's aren't part of the G7.
And Russia's not there, of course, because one, they're not a democracy, and two, their economy is well below the line at this point. That there are 4 or 5 others that could easily be there before them that are more democratic and have bigger economies.
Right, and I mean, actually, that's not even. I mean, nominally, they were included despite all that because it was basically playing nice.
They have nukes and they're mad.
Well, I mean, they were included in the first place back in the 90s when it was the post-Soviet era and we were trying to install our idea of what that government should look like. And so we were like, all right, well, we're happy with the fact of how this is going. So, we'll throw you a bone, include you in G7. You get to, or G8, you get to keep feeling important. And then, turns out Russia's economy didn't really do anything. They didn't really have a democracy really going on. And then finally they invaded Ukraine and everyone went, well, we're done with this shit.
Yeah. And, so while there, Trump was asked the question about, Russia's annexation of the Crimea, which provoked their expulsion from the G7. And Trump replied, quote, "You'll have to ask Obama because he was the one that let Crimea get away. He allowed Russia to take Crimea, and I may have had a much different attitude." Now, of course, that's idiocy,
right? Absolutely, incredibly dumb.
And those exact words will play to his base so well because they're that stupid.
Yeah, they just want to blame Obama for everything, or whoever really. But as long as it's not any, as long as it doesn't imply anything, that was their fault.
So they come up with a joint statement, the communique that they all usually sign at the end.
Yeah. And
it looks like after lots of negotiation, because Trump didn't want to sign anything to do with, trade, no tariffs. Which is
hilarious because he went there and yelled at them about how we're all pro free trade. We should be getting rid of all the protectionism and all the tariffs and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, he's also the guy that shit talks NAFTA for getting rid of the tariffs and protectionism. I mean, I actually think there are some very serious problems with NAFTA. I don't necessarily agree with his position on the matter, but I at least am inclined to
NAFTA helped export a lot of car manufacturing jobs out of this country.
Yeah, I'm certainly inclined to, give fair consideration to someone that's saying NAFTA is a problem because, well, we're all pretty inclined to listen to someone that's saying something we basically agree with. But even then, he's still even if you agree with him on that, he's then this huge hypocrite that goes over to G8 and is like, why are we having all these tariffs and stuff that he just implemented? We should be getting rid of all of that. What a jackass.
It's crazy. And then he finally agrees that he's going to sign it. And then, on Air Force One on the way back, he hears about, the various words that Trudeau has used to describe the situation, to describe how they got there. And Trump says this, quote, "Based on Justin's false statements at his news conference and the fact that Canada is charging massive tariffs to our U.S. farmers, workers, and companies, I have instructed our U.S. reps not to endorse the communique as we look at tariffs on automobiles flooding the U.S. market." So basically he's saying, because Trudeau said something mean to me, I'm going to now place massive tariffs on the cars coming out of Canada.
Also, that quote was just him tweeting out at almost the same point that the reporters on Air Force One were being told that the U.S. was going to sign off on the joint statement.
It's crazy.
It's just such an unprofessional shit show. It's not even just that it's a shit show, it's that it's also an unprofessional one.
I do like Trudeau's game that he played at the G7.
Oh, yeah, that was fantastic.
He opens up part of the G7 by handing Trump a framed photograph of an old framed photograph from, I believe, 1897 of Trump's grandfather's brothel that he had in Canada.
Yes. Because
Trump's grandfather started their real estate empire with a brothel. And I think that's hilarious that that's what he gave him. Now, he called it a hotel, but everyone knows exactly what kind of hotel it was.
That is not exactly a secret anywhere.
Yeah, and so I think it's funny that he decided to put right out on the public stage in front of the entire world. Here's how Trump family got their money, hookers, right here.
I also like
Here's the brothel.
The now getting widely circulated picture from the G7 meeting with Trump sitting at one side of a table looking real angry and
everyone looking over the table at him.
No, half of them are looking at Angela Merkel, who's the one standing right in front of him
and is leaning over him ready to pounce.
And everyone else is either glaring at Trump or looking at Merkel are you seeing this shit?
Yeah. It's absolutely insanity. And then, he goes on also this week to attack Jeff Sessions again for the recusal.
That was also at the oh no, I'm sorry. It was the Jeff Sessions thing was earlier this week when he again attacked Sessions via tweet with, quote, "The Russian witch hunt hoax continues, all because Jeff Sessions didn't tell me he was going to recuse himself. I would have quickly picked someone else. So much time and money wasted. So many lives ruined. And Sessions knew better than most that there was no collusion." Which, I mean, the idea that like someone would know better than most that there was no collusion, like how? What possible way would he have to know that something didn't occur?
He could have known that it did occur, but not that it didn't.
Yeah, all he could know is that he didn't witness any. Like, unless
but
he
we now
was
know
the guy,
that he did.
Right, we totally know that. But like the best case scenario on that statement is I never personally witnessed or heard anything that might lead me to believe that there could be any collusion. Like that's all anyone can honestly say ever, unless you were the person like directly responsible for some sort of mid-level managing position that was just high enough that you hear everything in the organization, but low enough that you're still interacting with all the low-level people. That's literally the only way that's possible, and that's such a rare thing to even be a position that like it's not even a solid excuse. Let alone in the case of Sessions, who absolutely, one, knew there was collusion, and two, was not in a position where he would have been that guy otherwise.
Mind-blowing.
But
he's an idiot, and he is president.
And,
he still thinks he can pardon himself.
Yeah, that was the same day that he did the thing on the White House lawn about, Russia should be in the meeting. He was like, quote, "I have an absolute right to pardon myself." And then that was after a few days before tweeting out, "As has been stated by numerous legal scholars, I have the absolute right to pardon myself. But why would I do that when I've done nothing wrong? In the meantime, the never-ending witch hunt, led by 13 very angry and conflicted Democrats and others, continues into the midterms." Which, I mean, just think about how much it would take to enumerate the different ways in which that statement was wrong. Like, no, numerous legal scholars don't say you have the absolute right to pardon yourself. Like, 2 of them have suggested that at all, and they aren't very good ones. A couple more have suggested that he might have the right to pardon himself under some circumstances, and a whole lot more say, we're pretty sure the president actually can't pardon himself ever. In fact, that would undermine basically 2 of the major legs on which the entire premise of our system of justice stands, which are that no one can be a judge in his own case and that no one is above the law. Right. So there's that part. Then there's the part where the investigation is a witch hunt, of course, and that it's led by 13 very angry and conflicted Democrats, when in fact basically everyone in charge of it is a lifelong Republican, including Robert Mueller.
Yep.
And Jim Comey was a Republican. Oh, he's gone now, but back when he was still involved. And then Rod Rosenstein was appointed by Trump himself. I mean, he'd been previously appointed by others as well, but, Trump kept him on. Like, all these people that were either outright declared Republicans or have been put in their positions by Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, literally everything he said in the statement was wrong. I mean, again, I don't understand how this guy's president. It's killing me. Right? We can move on to Brexit. We can go over to the UK here and find out more about how Russia actually helped fund and bankroll the Brexit fund with Aaron Banks and Nigel Farage.
Stop me if this one sounds familiar. Russia funding very rich businessmen who bankroll someone's campaign in another country to achieve their political ends.
I wonder. So,
was I describing America, the UK, Ukraine? Like, take your pick.
The story is very, very similar to most of the other stories that have come out here. Aaron Banks, the millionaire businessman who bankrolled Nigel Farage's campaign to quit the EU, had multiple meetings with Russian embassy officials in the run-up to the Brexit referendum. documents seen by the Observer, a UK newspaper there.
Not to be confused with the U.S. papers also
Right.
using Observer.
Right. Suggest, that these meetings have happened. And they go on to list just multiple meetings between the leaders of Leave.eu and high-ranking Russian officials between November 2015 and 2017. Introductions to Russian businessmen who offer billion-dollar deals for Russian gold mines. I mean, it's entirely. Well, actually, it's not. It's the exact same play they make everywhere. It's literally
at this point
they've just got a playbook.
Yeah, and they just photocopy the sheet and fill in a couple of blanks of what country they're doing it in and who they're funding this time, and which way that plan fucks over whatever country they're funding.
Amazing.
And remarkably unsubtle, and yet there are still people trying to pretend like this isn't just transparently obvious to anyone paying any attention.
The thing that I find interesting is the same play also leads to the same outcome in terms of the demographics who fall for it. So, here in America, it was mostly an older vote that put Trump in place, and most of the young vote went for Hillary. And Trump, of course, was being pushed hard by the Russians. In Brexit, where Russia wanted Brexit to happen simply because of the chaos that would ensue, it was almost entirely pushed through by old people. And the majority of under 28, I believe it was over 70% of the people under 28 that voted to stay in the EU. So all of the youth of the country who have to take over the country and get handed this country are having it ripped out of the EU before they can get control of it from all these old idiots who are falling for this Russian propaganda.
And of course, every time you wonder for a minute, like, why would it be that all these old people fall for? Well, okay, sure. Part of it is the fact that they've been subject to a lot of propaganda for a long time, often on a lot of these issues that laid the groundwork that the Russians took advantage of. But really, the thing that really seems to drive the disparity in demographics, at least in my opinion, is the fact that the younger people are accustomed to being on the internet and knowing that, hey, this is some random asshole saying this. I don't need to give them any credibility whatsoever. And understanding like that just because someone said something on the internet doesn't mean there's any credibility behind it. And sure, there are plenty of dumb younger people who don't understand that or are very bad at judging credibility. But overwhelmingly, it seems to be older people who don't have that background that are bad at making that judgment about, hey, this is just someone advertising or lying to me. Maybe I shouldn't take them seriously.
I would go back to the old, my favorite piece from 4chan, which was "Pix or get the fuck out."
Right.
And, you've got to show proof. I don't care who you think you are. I don't care what statements you've made. They are lies until you show me proof. And, at this point, that doesn't play too well because it's too easy to fake. I mean, you can at this point fake the voice and video now. You can put people's faces on other people.
Yep.
Like deepfakes is ruining all of this. Pics won't even matter anymore.
I mean,
what are we going to do?
I actually think for all of the shitty stuff involved in the deepfakes thing, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but the idea of a public project to do that, I think is actually very beneficial because someone was doing that privately anyway, and probably at least as well. And if there wasn't that public awareness that, hey, this is a thing that literally anyone can do at any time, then people would be abusing the fact that they could get away with faking it and no one being the wiser.
Yeah, no, deepfakes is definitely interesting. And that is, it's going to be interesting to see how that's used in the near future elections because it's going to get used. Oh,
yeah, we're going to see that over and over as, proof of wrongdoing.
There's someone building training models for deepfakes on every major politician right now.
Absolutely. And probably looking to get a lot of money for the use of that.
Yes. We won't be getting it from Manafort.
That's true.
That's always a plus. So Scott Pruitt, again, in the news for being a complete and total piece of shit.
Yeah, once again, shockingly enough.
The head of, our EPA here directed an EPA aide to contact a senior Chick-fil-A executive as part of an effort to land his family a franchise. Now, we know that that is basically self-enrichment. from a federal job, and that's not allowed.
Yeah, the actual ethics regulations for federal employees actually not only prohibit the like enrichment side of that, but like directing staff to do personal stuff is already against the ethics regulations.
So a group of Democratic reps, Gerald Connolly, Donald Bayer of Virginia, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Ruben Gallego of Arizona, Pramila Jayapal of Washington, and Ted Lieu of California sent a letter to the FBI on Friday, formally requesting that the Justice Department investigate Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt for potential criminal conduct. So they are basically saying, look, here are all of the things that he's done so far that we know are illegal that you haven't prosecuted yet. When are you going to do something?
Well, technically what they said was, quote, at the very least, we know that federal ethics laws bar public officials from using their position or staff for private gain. Administrator Pruitt has certainly done just that. Further, his actions related to his wife's employment and the quid pro quo condo situation with industry lobbyists may have crossed a line into criminal conduct, punishable by fines or even time in prison. End quote.
Of course, they're being diplomatic with their language, but what they actually said there,
This motherfucker belongs in prison.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's hope that's where he ends up.
I mean, at this point, it's starting to look like his ship is taking on some water, because even Trump is starting to like back off a little. He's still saying, Scott Pruitt's doing a great job within the walls of the EPA, but then he was like, and I'm not saying he's blameless.
Yeah, that's an exact quote. Trump said, and I'm not saying he's blameless, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, when you see even Trump starting to like, maybe this guy isn't 100% on the up and up, that person is about to go down. And at this point, I mean, we now know there are at least a dozen ongoing investigations related to Pruitt, including by the EPA's Office of the Inspector General, the GAO, Congressional Oversight Committees. This is just the first request that would be a criminal probe. And it's already gotten so bad that we've already had 2 Republican senators and almost about half a dozen Republican representatives call for him to resign. So at that point, you can see the writing on the wall, which can't come soon enough.
It is coming.
Can't come soon enough.
Let's talk 51% attacks. So this is crypto terminology in terms of, cryptocurrency like Bitcoin.
Yes.
So one of the big fears as this cryptocurrency has started to grow and get a large market cap, a lot of money involved.
And I mean, this is just to throw this out, this is actually something that the 51% attacks were theoretically known as a fundamental problem with Bitcoin, or potential one from the literally.
Right. So as this started to grow, people continued to fear that there would be a point at which enough control of the network was gathered up that one person, one group, one company, whatever, had 51% of the processing power. And let's explain that, because that's really technical for most people. So you've got a Bitcoin. You would like to send that Bitcoin to someone, be it you're giving it to someone, you're selling it, whatever you're doing, it is moving from your Bitcoin wallet to someone else's Bitcoin wallet. At the point that you choose to do that, that is sent out as a transaction onto the blockchain. And it has to be confirmed cryptographically to have come from you and to be going where it's supposed to be going by all of the nodes, which are all the servers out there that run the Bitcoin network. And once a certain percentage of them have verified and said, this is true, this is real, it gets written into the blockchain. So if less than 51% are saying your transaction should go through, then your transaction does not go through. If more than 51% are saying your transaction went through, then your transaction goes through. It's a very simplified version of it, but basically whoever controls more than 50%, so 51% or higher, of the network can say what transactions are true, what transactions are false, which ones get canceled, which ones get saved. They have control of the ledger. It's like going to your bank and having them turn the computer around and being able to type in whatever numbers you wanted into your bank account. You can literally just do whatever you want at that point.
Except it's even from the perspective of someone with control, it's actually a bit more specialized than if you could just go into the bank and just play with the numbers. Because with the bank, you could just go into their computers and type in any numbers you want, and maybe they'd get in trouble later for fraud. But with this, you actually are taking that money out of other people's accounts. It is a zero sum, well, unless you're double spending coins or something,
sure.
which you
so
totally
there's
can do.
many attacks you can do at the time that you get to this. And they all involve you basically stealing or kind of sort of in some cryptos creating just money out of thin air. And when you do the 51% attack, it's you paying for enough servers, so you are doing enough computing that you control the network. You can write to the blockchain whatever you want. So one of the big attacks is laid out this way. Say I spend a coin and it makes it to your wallet. And then I take it out of that wallet and I put it somewhere else. So into another wallet, right? And then I go back and I rewrite history by undoing the transaction that sent it to me in the first place. Well, now it's over with you and it's over in this other one because those are both true on the blockchain at this point. I have basically double spent. There's way more technical ways to describe this, but now you can kind of see how that should not be allowed. But since I have 51%, I can do whatever I want.
I can just tell you it's true and everyone will accept this.
So
they
I
have
can
no
cancel
choice.
transactions, I can double spend, I can add transactions at will. And why this is becoming a thing is the ability to compute for these servers is now commoditized, much like you can go to Amazon or Google or Microsoft and buy up, cloud computing and set up as many servers as you want without having your own hardware. You can now go to places like a company called NiceHash and say, I would like this much processing power, and it's called hash rate for calculating cryptocurrencies, and you just take it. And so you can now do the math on how much current calculating is going on a cryptocurrency, let's say Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash or any of these others, and you know how much you need to pay NiceHash to buy up 51%. So let's say there's 100,000, just to make up a number going on over here, then you need to buy up 51, right? So you do the math over at NiceHash, how much does 51 cost? And if that number is lower than the amount of money you can make by stealing all of that cryptocurrency, then you do it because the math works out.
Yes.
So now in the last month that this has really become true because of the commoditization of the servers and the hash rate, 5 cryptocurrencies have fallen victim to the 51% attack that we know. And they're getting larger. So Bitcoin Gold, Monacoin, Verge, what were the others? Zencash
and Litecoin Cash.
And Litecoin Cash were all hit for hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses.
Yes.
So
and there's actually a site, Crypto51, that someone put up showing the exact cost of how expensive it is to 51% attack various blockchains using NiceHash specifically. And it turned out that it is super cost effective for a ton of them. All the smaller ones, basically, like Bytecoin, for example, could cost less than $720 to attack using NiceHash rented computational power.
So there are thousands of coins at this point, and it's really a problem of their size. If there's very few people using a specific coin, then buying up 51% of the hash rate is very cheap. And if it's all public, so all of the blockchains for all of these, all of their information, all has to be public. So this Crypto51 site can just calculate out exactly at any given time what you have to go do at NiceHash to go 51% a coin. And most of them are cheap enough and worth enough that even after you 51% it and the value drops a little, you're still going to profit right now.
Honestly, even something like Bitcoin would probably be technically profitable to do But
unbelievably expensive at this point.
yeah, the upfront capital investment to make it happen would be
risk.
very prohibitive for most people and simply not worth it for the rest, because the people operating on that level have their own ways of making large sums of money.
So now we get to watch and see how many more coins fall victim to this now that everyone knows how cheap it is and how profitable it is.
And remember that the big barrier for what a lot of the attacks do is they'll manipulate existing transactions. So they want to go after usually big transactions is what they'll target there. So the larger the transactions on a single network, the more appealing it is. While yes, the bigger network is harder to attack, it's also a more tempting target for the people that potentially could.
Yeah, it's good. It's going to be fun to watch how this plays out and what people come up with as ways to fight it. We're just going to have to watch that one. But let's move on to the wonderful topic of voter suppression.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is while it's a wonderful topic in general, it is actually the news recently is actually surprisingly good. 2 different U.S. federal courts have been issued.
It's half good.
Well, I would say 2/3, maybe 3/4.
Well, they've ruled definitely in favor of fighting voter suppression.
Yes.
But they've also basically left it where what happened has happened, and we're going to let you keep voting with the current situation where everyone was kind of suppressed.
Well, the reason was, so there were 2 different cases. One of them is in Indiana, and on Friday, U.S. District Judge Tanya Walton Pratt blocked Indiana from enforcing the law they passed last year that was about using the interstate cross-check system, the thing that Chris Kobach was big on. And, it's been used for voter suppression all over the place to kick people off the voter rolls if they were flagged. And the judge found, quote, the court agrees with Common Cause that the greater public interest is in allowing eligible voters to exercise their right to vote without being disenfranchised without notice, end quote. And basically said that, yes, there is a strong interest in protecting the integrity of voter registration rolls, but there are other ways to do that don't break the law. In fact, a bunch of them already are in place. And this one is not one of those. It also turns out that, in the few months after the election in 2016, using this, the state canceled almost 500,000 voter registrations. That's about 10% of the state's total registered voters, all based on them failing to respond to 2 postcards seeking to confirm their address and then not voting in the general election. So it really was, they were just looking for excuses to remove anyone that might have been, poorer people that are harder to reach, the people that may not have been regular voters or who might not have been around to check their mail for a bit or, something like that. Like it was the usual strategy.
I don't even respond to regular mail anymore.
Right?
I just, unless it looks like it's a check, I don't even open it. I throw it away. I literally don't understand why people send me mail.
So yeah, the ruling in Indiana was just pretty unequivocally good. They were absolutely right to block this. This is a bunch of crap. The interstate cross-check program is garbage and isn't intended to do anything except suppress voter turnout. And voter participation because, people tried to turn out and couldn't because they were no longer on the list. But the other one...
So we need same-day registration, of course.
Yeah, automatic and motor voter and, vote by mail. We need all of that. But, that obviously people with an vested interest in people not getting to vote don't like that. Unfortunately, the other case that was ruled last Friday, actually, was not quite as good. The federal court that was ruling on this case, which was in Georgia, found compelling evidence that Georgia lawmakers redistricted black voters specifically to preserve Republican power in districts 105 and 111. And they actually said, quote, in the ruling, quote, their express purpose was to change districts 105 and 111 just enough to protect the incumbents there without endangering the incumbent Republican House members in the neighboring districts. And that's exactly what they did, end quote. Now, the bad news there is that was part of a denial of a request for a preliminary injunction to halt some upcoming elections in the affected districts, which actually, isn't really the outcome we want there, except for the fact that this is actually about runoff elections, or not runoff elections, but runoff primaries. They already had the first stage of the primaries using the old system, and they were like, well, under the circumstances, we don't. First of all, the state tells us that they didn't move them because they were black. They moved them because they were Democrats, and the current SCOTUS precedent,
which you still shouldn't be able to do.
Right, but the existing legal precedent, according to the Supreme Court, is that that's allowed, which is complete shit that is true, but it is in fact true. But they didn't want to move the system basically in the middle of the process, which is and they didn't have
I can
sufficient.
understand that argument, but it's still it's bullshit that we got there in the first place. You shouldn't be able to move people just because they're Democrats to help your party win.
Of course. And I mean, every election that, follows anything set up under that bullshit scheme is, as far as I'm concerned, not a valid election. Like, when I'm sorry, but the way this works is that our elected representatives are supposed to get chosen by the people, not choose the people that they represent. Like, yeah. That is the
backwards.
Wrong way that's supposed to work. That is just people. I mean,
well, at this point, our elected officials are chosen by the large corporations and big donors and then put in front of us as the only choices.
Well, yes. And then we get to pick which of the two. Well, we don't actually get to pick which of the two, we want, because this shit happens.
Indeed. And of course, then we've got the Electoral College and a million other reasons why we don't get to pick anything.
But, the fundamental principle of a democratic republic like the United States is supposed to be that the people choose their representatives and not that the representatives choose their people.
Welcome to Trump's America.
I wish that we could put all of the blame on Trump, because that would simplify things so much.
It's been going on since near the beginning.
He is, we have now identified that the cancer is metastasized to the lungs.
Yes.
It had already hit most of the body, but this one we can really point to as really just prominent and noticeable.
Good times. So we get to watch Manafort go down in flames some more. We get new charges on a fresh indictee on Kalimnik there. Mm-hmm. And we get to watch the 51% attacks just continue to get easier and cheaper and more profitable, it looks like.
And we get to get all the fun of watching how, what that does to all the cryptocurrencies and how they interact with each other.
What I hope is it leads to some kind of innovation where the 51% attack no longer is a problem. I mean, a lot of times with this amount of money involved and a lot of, I'll just say it, nerdy types who don't want their toy taken from them, you're going to find a way to solve this problem. So I want to see what they come up with.
Yeah, just knowing the fundamental technical issues as to why it's a thing in the first place and how the cryptocurrencies actually do all their calculations, because it's all supposed to be distributed with no central authority that can tell you, that actually makes it really hard to come up with a way that you can undermine the existence of a 51% attack. So I'm really curious to see what they have in mind, or what they come up with as potential solutions.
There'll be white papers soon, and we'll be talking about them.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. That's episode 60. Good old round number there. Signing off.
Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GreggHoush Show and on Instagram at GreggHoush. If you like what you've heard and want to be a part of it, check out patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. In exchange for funding our programming, you gain access to exclusive content such as uncut editions of our podcast. We have new episodes every Thursday night. We hope you listen in. The GreggHoush Show was created by GreggHoush, executive produced by co-host Eric Gowrays, and co-hosted by Kayla Avery. Other contributors include producer and writer Anna Jeffrey, co-host producer David McGuffin, and writer-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for this show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, writer Maddie LoCicero, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action.